Does anybody kind of agree with her when it comes to, like, should women be subordinate to men when married?
Ask Kanye West. Didn't he just show us that's like being subordinate, right?
What?
His naked wife on the Grammy red carpet, she submitted to him to do that.
Allegedly, that's her idea. Like she really enjoys being naked, from what I hear.
Pre Kanye West, there was not a lot that was stopping that woman from taking her clothes off for anybody who she could take them off for a camera. So just pointing that out.
I think subordinate's an interesting word. I do believe that men should be the leader in most situations and relationships. But when I look at marriage specifically, it's I hate the word partner because it's like so co-opted, but you're supposed to be complementary to each other, right? Like we bring out the best and we demand the best out of each other. So I think women are a really good soundboard for men, and like the best relationships, they take advice from each other. But I do think that there needs to be a leader in the relationship, and it typically should be the man.
Does anybody agree with that?
I agree with that.
Or do you guys think...
I don't know what the S word means.
Subordinate?
Yeah.
Submissive, basically coming
deferring,
underneath,
like deference,
would be
I guess you could say. But does anybody here?
Well, yeah, just subordination would be an underling. So, like, if you're at you go to work, right? You got a boss. He's the boss. You're the subordinate.
Thank you.
So, who agrees with Candace? Like, should the man be the leader,
I
or do you guys view
caveats.
things more 50-50?
Well, my boyfriend...
Here, why don't we just go around the table? Okay, we'll start with you. What do you think?
So, I think it depends on the relationship. I think that some women can lead well and some men can. I remember last time I was saying that in my own relationship, I like it to be traditional, but I support other women, having the choice to be in a complementarian relationship or an egalitarian relationship. And I think the live chat, because I can't see it now, but last time I was here on the live chat, they kept saying that I wanted the good parts of feminism for myself, and I was trying to promote the bad, quote-unquote, bad parts to the rest of the female population. But that's not the case. It's just like how I have respect for people who are of a different religion than me, then that doesn't mean that I'm contradicting myself. I respect their right to make that choice to believe in what they do.
What's the nature of your relationship?
Well, I'm kind of like stay at home, and he is the breadwinner.
Sure. Going around the table, what about you?
I also think that when I think of a man, I think of someone masculine that kind of takes care of you, in a sense, more traditional. I definitely am a little more outspoken, so if we can banter back and forth and do things like that and have a say in what we're doing together, it's better. But for the most part, I think that a man should lead and be more masculine and just take care of you.
Sure. What about you?
It's a tricky question. I think it's all circumstantial, and every individual relationships are different. And
how do you want your relationship to be?
My relationship, I'm here on this podcast, and my boyfriend was not down. So, like, but also, like, I paid for it all myself. So unless, like, you know, he was paying all the bills and stuff, maybe, like, I would consider not coming onto the podcast. But since it's 50-50, then, like, I can kind of do what I want.
Okay. What about you, Carly?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the maturity levels of each partner. But personally, I think that everybody kind of has to have their own independence within a relationship, like just in terms of like everyone has their responsibilities and like, but it really does just depend on the relationship and like how each person is.
Once we go around, I'm going to ask like a really specific question. I think that will kind of get to the heart of the issue. What about you, though?
Yes, I agree, except again, there's so many caveats because there's all this pressure on men to, be the leader, but men don't even know themselves. So you're asking them to do something they don't know how to do and they haven't been taught to do. So this is why we get into all of the mix of the problems of what you see in a relationship if the woman doesn't want to follow the lead because the lead doesn't know how to lead. And then she can't trust the lead, and then it's a shit show.
Sure. Lily?
I think it's really circumstantial, but in my personal relationship, I would like
a 50-50.
50-50. Carly, it looked like you wanted to jump in really quick, or
I was just saying that like I like totally agree with
agree
that.
with it. Got it. I think you already kind of talked about it. Ayla, I guess your position on this topic, if you want to elaborate a bit.
I just don't know what should means. Like, should for what purpose?
What do you mean?
Like, should you jump up and down? And I'm like, well, should you do that in order to achieve what goal? Like, the shoulds are
he doesn't
contingent.
mean should. He doesn't mean should is like an ought. He's talking in the comments. So when you're talking about like should, and you're doing the little like autistic Hetzberg thing, I know exactly what you're doing. It's a very low tier form of philosophy. He's saying should in the comments. He's not saying should as an ought statement of a moral imperative.
What is a slightly higher tier of philosophy that you would recommend I try?
Well, I would start with understanding that you're not in a philosophical engagement at the moment, unless you see everything purely as a philosophical engagement, and that you would have to agree with me that you distinguish between words in the commons and you distinguish between words which have philosophical terms. So if somebody's engaging with you, for instance, a medical doctor or a lawyer, they're going to use legal terms or medical terms. They're going to have a different meaning than the common terms of those words or the philosophical terms. So when you say, I don't know what should means, I actually don't believe you in this context. I think you know exactly what he means by should.
This is the way that I talk all the time, and sort of the question that I would ask anytime somebody asks me if somebody should do anything.
Yeah, and I just explained to you that there's a distinction here.
I still don't understand what should means in this context. So
What does should mean in any context?
Well, it's usually dependent on something, right?
Okay.
Like, should I go to the store? I'm like, well, if you're hungry.
So dependent on this context, what do you think should means?
Like, my guess is probably there's some implicit, like, to be happy kind of thing, but I don't know if this is true.
Well, then we'll go with that.
I would like to check, though. Like, is that what we mean? Because if so, then I can answer.
Yeah, so can you even repeat what the question was?
But it's also different because sometimes people argue the purpose of like some types of social structures is not to be happy, but rather to have like a flourishing society or something.
Yeah,
which
like
is,
I'm fine getting into semantics with you when it comes to should, but can you repeat what the question even was?
Should men lead their wives or some variation on that?
Yeah, so he's asking from your worldview, whatever that is. I believe you say that you're a rationalist, so from whatever your rational worldview is, the should sense here is ought they or ought they not lead wives?
For what purpose? I can't get over the what purpose. Like for happiness, I think probably a lot of people would be happier if their husbands led them. This seems true.
Okay.
I don't think I would be that much happier, but I am not normal.
Okay, so then should they or should they not? Ought they or ought they not? For the purpose of happiness.
You sound very confident in the things that you say, but I'm not sure that makes you more right.
It doesn't make you more right because you don't understand the things I say either. So I would just like an answer when you're talking about ought or ought not. Ought they or ought they not for the purpose of happiness?
I can't answer. I mean, maybe I'm very stupid, and maybe you could explain this to me. But you're saying ought is a common use.
I'll use really small words.
Yeah, we can use very small baby words for me because my small little brain has difficulty sometimes. But when you're saying ought they lead their wives, do you mean that there's like a general sort of way that the world is good if it is and bad if it isn't, and you're referring to like a general sense of goodness?
No, I'm not inferring or making an implication for anything. This is an askance from the worldview of you, who is not me. Whatever your worldview is, who is not me, from your worldview that is not mine, ought men lead their wives?
I'm trying to communicate my view, and my view is something like, I think that some people would be happier if their husbands led them, and some people would be sadder if their husbands led them. I'm not sure that there's such a thing as an overarching goodness, so I don't really...
Got it. Okay, so sometimes. Thank you, appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying.
Well, that was an interesting exchange. I do have a question related to this, though, to, again, perhaps get to the heart of the issue. Who gets final say? So in a relationship or a marriage, whatever, let's say there's some sort of impasse. There is no resolution. You can't come, you want one thing, he wants the other. Who should get final say?
Whoever pays.
Hold on. So, and I think, Andrew, sometimes you refer to this as a threshold breaker, I think, but who do you think gets final say? Or would you, I guess, either in your own dynamics, who should get final say? What do you think? Starting with you, Ayla.
Like, it depends on the thing? I'm confused.
Sure.
Like, if you're disagreeing over, like, where should we move?
Sure.
I don't know, probably you should bet on it or like see who would want to pay more given that you had the money, or make prediction markets to figure out. I don't know. I don't think I operate by these norms, but I know a lot of people do.
Sure. What do you think?
I think it's going to depend on the situation. Obviously, you have to respect the person that you're with. So to do something that is going to damage the relationship or blatantly disrespect the other person's not going to end up, you're not going to end up with a thriving relationship. But it's like nothing's without consequence at the same time. So it's trusting your gut. Like if you trust your husband fully and he's like, this is a terrible idea, maybe consider the option that you were wrong and that he's right, and vice versa. So if you're telling him not to do something, and this happens a lot, if you talk to anyone in business, the wife will be like, that person had a really sketchy feeling. I don't think that this investment is good. The dude ignores the woman's intuition and the thing just like crumbles, right? So it's looking at the history of the relationship too. It's like, how often has he been right about this thing and you've been wrong, and vice versa.
Andrew, if I have you jump in really quick, do you want to provide like maybe a good example of like a impasse sort of situation that could arise in like a relationship or marriage, just for use as an example here?
Well, I mean, a very common one is just money. So the idea of how money is used or spent in a relationship versus not spent in a relationship is one of the number one disagreements that men and women have. So the idea is, if you can't come to an agreement on how money is spent or what school the kid should go to, which might infer spending money as well, right? Ultimately, there's only two of you, right? So either a third party has to break this threshold barrier, or one of you ultimately has to be the decider. Otherwise, how do you essentially how do you come to an agreement if both of you disagree? Like how is that done if one person ultimately doesn't end up with the final say?
I don't think one person holds that position permanently. So, and then it's also going to be who acts on it first. So typically women are the ones that set all of the appointments, pay the school tuition if they're going to a private school, set up the doctor's appointments. They make 60 to 80% of all of the household purchases. So if you're just looking at behavior, you'd say women are, but that could be the man saying no and they're just making that decision anyways. So
I'm not really sure that any of that would matter, though. So I understand
well,
what
it's
you're saying.
what's being acted on right now, right? So like whether or not that's right or that's helpful for a healthy relationship, like that's a whole different conversation. But what is happening is women are.
Right, I'm not sure it's actually pertinent to what I'm saying, though. So I understand what your position is. You're saying, hey, look, women already have lots of household responsibilities, and so they're in a decision-making role already. We're not really discussing that, though.
No, I'm saying that they're actually executing the decision already.
Yeah, well, but they're executing the decision at the behest of the husband, though. That right? So this is the consent of the husband. Essentially, is going into this decision-making meeting. She's doing the day-to-day activities because he's saying you should do these day-to-day activities, right? He doesn't have any disagreement with that. It's when there's disagreement within that, who becomes the arbiter then? How do we find this threshold breaker between two people for who makes the determination or who has the ultimate say?
Again, I don't think anyone holds that permanently, so it's trusting your partner. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, well, okay. If they don't hold it permanently, right, but let's say the man considers himself to be in the position of authority and has been in the position of authority, right, this still doesn't really get to the heart of the question of if there's a disagreement and they can't reconcile it. You say, well, the man doesn't hold that permanently. It's like, okay, great. But what I'm saying is when you can't reconcile the disagreement, you both disagree, who gets to ultimately make the decision? Whether you think that it's a permanent basis for a man to be in control of it or not, I'm not even sure that's relevant, really.
Well, because the question seems that it's permanent, so maybe I'm misunderstanding it. But if you're saying who's in charge and who is responsible for the deal breaker, that sounds like who is always responsible for the deal breaker.
No, not really.
Okay.
So what the question is asking is if two people, since most relationships anyway are two people. I understand that there's polyamorous people here and this type of thing, but that's outside of what you would consider the norm for society. It's usually man, woman, that's it, right? And people generally tend to not like to share their partners. You can dispute why that is, sexual liberation, whatever, but it is a fact that most people are in monogamous relationships, one man, one woman, most. That's globally, that's not even just in the West. So if that is the case, and you have a disagreement, can't reconcile it, right? How do you figure out who ultimately is going to have the say?
I don't know. I mean, I've been in a relationship for 15 years, and that's never happened. There's never been a decision that there was an impasse. And if there was anything that was even close to that, we tabled it until there was a mutual decision.
Yeah, but the problem is like, what if it's not a mutual decision? It's like, no, I'm not backing down on this.
Well, then how well do
think
they
that
really
I'm
communicate?
correct, right?
How well do they really communicate? Because the reality is, if you care about the person, especially you're talking about specifically a marriage, the whole goal of conversations where you disagree is to let the other person feel heard, understood, and respected. And if both people are receiving that and there's safety involved, you're going to be able, maybe not that moment, maybe not that day, to come to a conclusion that feels really good to the both of you, where it doesn't have to be, it's my say-so because I say so and I'm the lead. And I think that's where the ego gets in there, and it can go wildly wrong. Whereas a man who, if we're going back to the man as leading, and a man in his like healthy masculinity, it doesn't come from a place of ego, it comes from a very confident place where he knows who he is, and he cares very much for the other, for the partner, for the wife, and so he gives a whole lot of hex, I cuss a lot so I should filter it, about her being on board with him. So it's a mutual exchange of, again, being heard, understood, and respected. There's not going to be this, okay, I get the final say. That's like a child, which unhealthy, but that is like a child-parent relationship to me.
Oh, okay. Well, that's nice and all, but it doesn't actually answer the question. So I understand that you're saying there should be mutual respect. We should both feel heard. We should both discuss things, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, great. So you've discussed everything, and he still disagrees with you and thinks, no, you're incorrect, and I'm just really not willing to budge on this. So either we have one of two choices, right? Either the relationship is over because you won't budge, or he won't budge, or you won't concede, or what? What's the other option? You would have to concede to the authority, right? Like, I don't see any way around it.
I don't understand this though. I thought relationships were all about compromise.
Yeah, I think the answer that you're looking for would be answered if you gave us like a specific scenario instead of just being like, who gets final say? Because it like
Super broad.
That's it. Yeah, it's way too like if you ask a very specific like give us a specific scenario. Like I think you'll get the answers that you're looking for.
I mean, the specific scenario wouldn't even be relevant, but I'll give you one just to give you one, I guess.
I think that would.
So there's money, there's money, there's an inheritance of $100,000, okay? It's left to both of the members of the household, not just one, okay? And they're arguing about how to spend it. And the man is saying, okay, listen, I've heard all of your reasoning, I've heard all of your everything, right? I'm hearing you. Right, I'm compassionate towards you, but also no, we're going to spend it on this instead.
That is not a relationship.
Why would it not just be split? I don't.
Yeah.
To me, it's sent to both of them. It's $100,000. They each get 50, and they can do what they want with it.
Yeah, and also in this scenario,
and
are
he's
there
saying
kids?
No.
Like it
but
really.
he's saying no, right? He's saying, look.
Well, that's kind of
no. He's saying no. I don't want it split. I want it going towards whatever this household thing is.
so already. I don't have respect for the
That's a
person doing
divorce.
that.
Yeah.
That's
Right,
a
because
divorce.
This seems like such
Okay.
a stupid question.
Yeah, it's about like respect, not about like you can't just give one person ultimate power, and it really once again depends on the situation. Like it's a partnership, it's a relationship. You both talk about it, and like depending on the situation, yeah, maybe someone will make the final say, but it depends, and you still have to have that conversation, and you still have to have that respect.
Yeah, so then in this situation, we're talking about authority then, right? The man really doesn't have any authority, because ultimately if he says, listen, this is super important to me, and I know it's super important to you too, right? But I'm not willing to budge on it because I really think I'm right here. You feel in that instance it's totally appropriate for you to, and I quote, get into that's a divorce, right? So then this would infer that you actually have a lot of power in this situation, a lot of power in this dynamic that a man wouldn't have or wouldn't exercise. So if that's the case, right, it would basically make men want to steer clear of marriages like that, right? Because the position of authority would not actually be there.
Yeah, well, I'm saying divorce in terms of if he came up to you and he was like, this is what we're doing, you don't get a say, like that's how you kind of like, or that's what I took from it the first time that you mentioned it.
No, he listened to what you had to say. Everything you had to say.
Yeah, because if
he just thinks that what you had to say is incorrect, and that ultimately it needs to go the way that he wants it to go because he thinks you're incorrect. So if that is the case, right, then if we're still in divorce territory, then what you're doing
I never
is
said we
saying
were
that-
still in divorce territory.
I would say that you
right.
have to recognize everyone's skill set, right? So let's say that the woman tends to be better with money in this example, and the man is better. I don't know. Let's say he's like a contractor, so he's not into investing, and the conversation is around like, what do we do with this inheritance? So if historically speaking, she's been more accurate and more well-versed in finances, that would probably go to her. And then if it was something in his wheelhouse, so it's just dependent on the person's specialty, I think is probably
Yeah, but that's
the
not what's in
healthiest way.
dispute. It's not in dispute that these two people would have variety of skills. All those skills could be variously applied. There could be skills she's far better at than him. The hypothetical is looking towards we're not able to compromise on this one thing, whatever it is. We're not able to come to an agreement, right? We're just not able to. So this would again state that there would have to either be somebody makes the concession, right, or you part ways. I don't see a way around that exactly.
Right, but then earlier you said no one's holding that position permanently, but you want one answer, like absolutely, like it's either absolutely the man or absolutely the woman, and then everyone that's asking for context.
No. This is a critique. That was a critique of your worldview. So I just conceded that even if it was the case that that both parties did not permanently hold this position, it still doesn't answer to the question of when you hit this impasse, right? How do you deal with it when one won't compromise because they both think that they're right? One person would have to ultimately be the person who was conceded to.
Right, and it's whoever excels in that dominion. So again, if it's finances, typically that ends up being the man, traditionally speaking. So if it has to do with money, it's going to be the man. If it has to do with the kids or people, I would say it's the woman.
Yeah.
Then you're taking the feminist position. Then.
How's that
So
feminist?
Because what you're doing is you're saying that there's a shared authority.
There's not. It's not necessarily authority, and I think that there is a difference between leadership and authority. Like leadership is looking for counsel, and it's not just dismissing anyone else.
How can you have authority or leadership with no authority? I don't even know how that's done.
It's
like
a relationship.
leadership to me implies that there's authority, that people are seeing you as an authority of some kind. They're looking to you as an authority of some kind. I'm not even sure that you can have leadership.
Because you're
as an
instilling
authority.
respect, and in that respect, the person is choosing to follow. That's the difference.
Well, yeah, but regardless of why they are, perhaps it's because you show them respect or something like this, they would still have to concede some sort of authority for leadership, right?
Would you like us to be in relationships where we cede to authority of a man?
It has nothing to do with what I would like. I'm just asking this
Kind of
question.
sounds like it
because
is,
we're at-
though.
I was just curious.
I don't actually think I'm getting an answer to
Okay,
it. So.
you want an answer? Here's your answer from all of us, from what I've heard, at least from the people talking. It depends on the situation. A relationship is a partnership. Nobody has absolute say over anything. And if you seriously are in an argument that's that deep and like you can't compromise and both people are not like, they're not willing to budge at all, then why are you in a relationship? Like the whole point of a relationship is you guys are equals, and yeah, you have different responsibilities. Maybe some people have different things that they focus on that they do. But at the end, it's not about gender. It's not about who has more power. It's about the situation. And like,
Well, that really wasn't, I mean, that's your view, yeah, but that really wasn't her view. Her view was she thought a man should generally lead, right? A man should generally be in a position of authority.
And they
But then
can't.
when we hone in on it, it looks like more that there's a shared authority, which is more of a feminist position. So I understand your position. I get it. You were clear on the outset. You believe that men and women should share authority in a relationship. I get it. I understand. I'm not disputing that. I'm just looking at the idea of if you think a man should mostly have authority, I don't know what the hell that actually means if we reduce it to, well, unless he's not really good at it, and then the authority moves over to the woman. I'm not sure how we even make these determinations unless you're ceding to your own authority. You
Well,
see what I'm
that's
saying?
because this has been like dragged out, and you're not accepting anyone's answer. So initially, my response was, it's trusting the other person. So yes, the man can absolutely lead, but there's a difference between a leader and a tyrant. So if you have the man that's leading and you respect his decision, you come to an impasse. What I originally said, which wasn't accepted, was that in my 15-year relationship, this has never come up, because in that dynamic, nothing has been at an impasse. And if anything was, it was mutually tabled until we could revisit it and come to an answer. So it wasn't me taking the lead.
I don't know why you're saying I don't.
Because
I
that
accept
answer
that
wasn't
you-
accepted
I
originally.
accept that you're answering. I'm not accepting that you're giving an actual answer. So
That is absolutely
the
an
question is
answer.
not, in your personal life, have you ever had an impasse with a man or your husband or whoever? That's not the question. The question is, I'm not asking that.
I
I'm
know.
not asking about your personal situation, because I don't give a shit, right? The question is asking specifically, if authority is to be shared, the dynamic is to be shared, then who ultimately makes the decision for who even gets to share the authority, right? If it's going to be you get to make that decision, then it can't really be that the man is in authority most of the time, because it would infer, there would at least be an inference here that you're sharing authority with him.
Yeah, you would decide that ahead of time. I think this goes back to communication. I think, and the fact that everyone's saying all relationships are different. I think if you're conversing about this with your partner ahead of time, it's like, hey, let's talk about authority. Let's talk about who gets the final say. Are there areas that you feel like you want the final say in? And how do I feel about that? Are there areas I feel like I want the final say? Like we talked about kids, money, all of those things. You can create so much, like eliminate so many problems if you just have communication on the front end and talk about what feels good for each person. It's going to look different in every relationship, but that would be what I say. There is just this, you're wanting this overarching umbrella, it sounds like, of like, this is the way it is, this is the way it should be, that's it. And it just doesn't really work, because
I haven't
all
told you
humans are
anything
different.
that I want. Like, all I'm doing is this. This is so that you know, okay? She made a claim. She said, most of the time, I think a man should be in a position of authority. So all I'm doing is exploring that idea by asking her, okay, but if the position of authority is actually shared, how's he really in authority? That's what
I said
we're diving into.
leadership.
Hang on. That's what we're diving into, right? I'm not disputing that you could make prearrangements with somebody for who has authority, who doesn't. I'm not disputing that you can't have long conversations and walks on the beach at night to make determinations about decisions in your life. I'm not disputing any of that. I'm just trying to determine who ultimately, if authority mostly should be in the hands of a man, gets to determine that authority then. And if it's you, aren't you really the authority?
I'll sit here while she's gone.
I mean, I feel like, we've kind of said, like, like, we just keep repeating our answers. Like, sorry, that is not the answer that you're looking for. But, I mean, everybody's different. And, like, if someone's in a relationship where, like, the man is considered, like, head of the household, you still have to make those big decisions together. And, like, yeah, maybe he'll decide, like, what he wants to eat for dinner, or, like, something smaller. But I personally feel like in terms of, like, really big decisions like that, you can't really have one person fully take over. But once
Yeah, I
again,
understand
that's
that.
just-
But I've always understood your view. Your view is equality. Just so you know, your view is different than the view of the girl next to you, the girl next to her, the girl next to her. I'm only exploring one view of a person who's not you, right? So therefore, I would like her to answer the question, because she's her, and not you, who
She
has a
did
different
answer,
view.
though.
Hang on, who has a different view than she does. So back to her, I'd like to just, if you don't mind, if we can just finish this real quick. I'm actually still confused, right? So perhaps without the sisterhood getting involved with their view, which I don't give a shit about, and just your view, if it is the case that authority is shared, right, or not, in your case you say the man should mostly be an authority.
Lead.
Are you the determiner of that?
No, and again,
Well, then who is? Who is the determiner?
it depends on the subject. So there have been conversations where, and these are exact conversations, if it has to do with health, if it has to do with medicine, if it has to do with food, if it has to do with the kids, it is you. I trust you entirely to make these decisions. That has been conversations in my relationship. And then if it has to do with money, that's him all day. He'll ask me once in a while, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And then he ultimately does whatever he wants. Like, that's my dynamic, and I'm very
Are you
happy with
ceding
it.
ultimately to your authority?
No, not at all. Because if I didn't want to do something with money,
Yeah, well, hang on, you are. I'll show you. So if you say, If you're saying on all of these different situations, me.
No,
trust
he
you.
assigned them to me.
Okay, but the ones you assigned to him, let's say, right? I trust you to do these things, X, A, B, C, D, whatever it is, right? So what happens if you fail to trust him on one of these particular issues, right? You're still going to see to yourself, you, the person, as to whether or not this should be followed or not followed, which would actually put you in a position of authority,
That's
right?
never happened in my relationship.
I know. I'm not asking if it's happened. I'm just telling you that the consequence would be that you are still in a position of authority. You're
No,
ultimately
because
feeling your
I've
authority.
relinquished that. It's with the agreed upon subjects. So if it comes
You
to money,
relinquished it based on your authority, though, and you'll bring it right back the second you need
no,
to. That's the
because
point.
trust me, there have been plenty of financial bombs, and I have said it, and I have disagreed till I was blue in the face, and he still pressed forward, and I let him do that, and I did. It's not like
Yeah, you let him.
yeah, because I could choose to nag, I could choose to
Right.
make his life a nightmare. I'm not, right? Because that is so that if you want to use your terminology, that is submitting, right? That is letting him lead. Right,
Yeah, it's not really in the case of this. It's still the question is still kind of who has the authority ultimately. Because if you just say, "Well, I will
Circular
cede these things over because I want to, because I choose to, this and that," that actually doesn't really infer authority. Like you're not really giving him
Guys,
the say
stop.
of, for instance, let's say you're in a Christian marriage. The gal here, the deconstructionist, she can probably confirm this, right? The belief there would be that the man is in authority regardless of what your personal viewpoint is on what it is that he's doing, right? You were supposed to cede the authority to him. So the question here is rooted, who has ultimate authority? Is it you or him? If you're just ceding it to him because you want to, then it would imply that you still have kind of authority.
Well, in the Bible, it does talk about submitting to each other. A man and a wife should submit to each other.
Yeah, sure. I'm giving you an example of a view. That's it. So that I can explain, when we're talking about authority means in charge, not in charge because you allow it. That's the point.
Well, we live in a country where relationships only exist because of consent. So you're talking about allowing, it is allowed, because now we're getting into non-consent territory.
Yeah, so in this case then, the position of authority for a man is make-believe.
It's not make-believe. It's be a strong enough man, have follow-through, be competent and confident so that you have a woman that follows you.
A man is physically larger, so everything that you do technically is because he's allowing it, right? Because he could physically stop you.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
So anyway, so yeah, when we're talking about authority though, it would just seem to infer then that men don't, even if you are saying, I'm following you because of X, Y, Z reason, right? You can retract that anytime you want. It's not really a position of authority. Like for instance, if you were in a workplace, right? You couldn't go to your boss and be like, you're not the boss anymore.
No,
Right?
but if
You couldn't do that. The only thing you could do in that case is leave. You know what I mean? But you couldn't usurp the position of authority, right? Because that would infer that you were actually the boss. If you could go to your boss, say you're not the boss anymore, I'm the boss. Who actually has the authority? See what I'm saying?
Yeah, but
So
do you think
that's
that
the
there's
point.
not a distinction though between a work relationship and a romantic relationship? Like the duties aren't different and how you show up and what you're looking
Yeah, sure.
for?
Sure. I'm not talking about those things. I'm just talking specifically about authority here. Who has authority in relationships and threshold breakers?
I know, and I guess
It'd be the same thing with a boss is like in a workplace. Who has the authority in the workplace? It's your boss, not you, right? So it'd be the same thing.
do you see authority and leadership as exactly identical? Because that's the thing that's kind of making
they're not identical. I just don't think. I think that leadership implies authority.
Are you trying to figure out where the power lies? Are you trying to point that power fundamentally lies in somewhere?
Yeah, I don't think that men, when women say that my man has the authority or this type of thing, I don't know that that's actually the case because it seems that the authority is granted from them the authority. So it almost seems circular.
So just to clarify your position, what would be an example of something where a man truly has authority?
He's your boss at work.
So in a romantic relationship, I mean.
Yeah, but that's not what you asked. You asked what would be a position.
I know I asked it, but I used the words wrong. My intent was.
I think in the West, I would be hard pressed to give you an example of where a man truly has authority.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want a closing thought on that, Andrew, or is that sufficient for you?
Yeah, you win. You have all the authority.
Yeah, well, it's just what I'm looking at is just whether or not we're dealing with the feminist view or not. So I understand the panelists have the feminist view of equality, egalitarianism, this and that, but she actually said something different, which is the implication that, hey, men actually mostly should have authority, but then when we reduce it, it's like, maybe not so much. Maybe not so much.
Sorry, I missed what you were saying. What was that?
I just said that, Andrew, you win. You have all the authority. Like, it just depends on the person and the man, I guess. I don't know. Like, you're making it seem
Well, thank
like
you. That was super helpful to the conversation. I appreciate it.
That's basically what I got out of it. Big, strong man.
Wait, so you're saying Andrew has all the authority? I'm just confused. I'm a little confused.
Yeah,
I
it's
just don't
like,
know.
you know, in his relationship, he's got all the authority, and that's what he's trying to prove is that, like, you know, every man should be like him, right? Is that the
Where
point?
was any of this stated? Like, it's just all headcanon. So what you should say is, Andrew, I'm about to make a bunch of fucking bullshit up, and then say it out loud for reasons nobody understands. You should just lead with that.
I didn't say anything. I just said, yes, sir.
Yeah, you just lead with, I'm about to make up a bunch of bullshit, and then say it out loud for reasons nobody understands.
Andrew, there's a chat here coming for you.
Jane_Slice donated $200.